This weather is kind of so frustrating. As much as it's lovely that we're dry and I can get into every single apiary and I can drive right up to every hive, which is pretty unusual for the end of April, we've had no rain at all. And it's kind of a bit sunny now, you can see. But all that hawthorn there, which is in flower, there's hardly any bees flying. You can probably see my cell builder there. I wasn't able to graft last night because it was just so cold. Not that I would have grafted of an evening, I would have grafted earlier, but even earlier in the day it was still too cold. The bees are hardly flying. All these hives are packed full of bees and there's hardly any movement, you know. There's just one or two bees flying around. It's just like very frustrating, and I'm not moaning because I have got some honey in the hives. But it's just a shame that we're stuck in this kind of weird weather pattern where there's like a blocking high again over Europe. The south of Europe is getting like loads of thunderstorms and heat and really heavy rain and storms, and we're getting like nothing. We just got this high pressure over us. As I said, it's frustrating, but I suppose it is what it is. But we have honey at the moment to get off. So I went to lots of apiaries yesterday because I've been strimming. In other words, I've been doing whippersnippering, or what else do you call it, weed whacking. And all that's been done in all the apiaries, because when we harvest in the spring, we harvest with a blower. And we put the supers on their sides and we blow the bees off to in front of the hive and they all crawl back in. But it's actually pretty safe to do. And that's why this dry weather is actually the bonus, because the grass isn't wet when the bees hit it. And the bees all crawl back in relatively quickly. So I've got a bit of help when I start pulling honey this weekend. Some brute force, a mate of mine who is going to help me out. And we're going to basically do 5 or 6 apiaries in one day, and then that goes back to the house here. It's a lot of unloading. I haven't got any real manual handling facilities, but I've got places to stack supers. So the whole idea is to get off as much honey as we can in one day, and then I'll process that, get it extracted over the weekend, and then I'll put the supers back on the Monday, Tuesday. That's the theory. And then next week I'll pull the rest off myself and get that processed. And also next week my first cells are going to come out. So this is the really, really big crunch time for beekeepers, where you want to start doing splits, so you raise some queens. At the same time, your honey comes ready. If I don't pull my honey this week, it's going to start to crystallize. But I went up the road to the apiary I told you about that was surrounded by green manures. In other words, it was in flower really early. And the supers have only been on there 2.5 weeks, and already the honey's crystallized. It seems to me it's flowers from mustard that was in full flower when I put the supers on, and it's crystallized already. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to bin the honey. I'm not going to give it back to the bees, unless there's just a little bit in each super. I'll leave that on. That's generally what we do. When we pull supers, if the bottom super's say full, you obviously harvest that. If the next super or the one underneath, depends how you put them on when you put them on to add extra supers. If one of those is got 1 or 2 frames in, I'll harvest that. But if it's only got half of 2 frames, I'll leave it on for the bees. It's just not worth the time and the hassle. Or I'll go around and collect up 3 or 4 and put them together into one super and then take that home. You just have to look at what it's worth. And when you're harvesting in a hurry and you're trying to use your manpower to get all your honey off quickly, that's what you have to do. You have to just use your common sense and kind of use a global effort in each apiary. So I'm going to scrape those plastic frames clean. I'll probably stack the supers up with any crystallized honey. And as I said, if it's worth it, in other words, if there's only a tiny bit, I'll leave that in the hive. But if it's worth it, I'll scrape the whole frame clean and put it back into the 10 configuration, so the frames will get rebuilt in the summer flow, if we have one. But the bees will lick the frames clean afterwards. And then I'm going to melt that honey down slowly and let the wax come to the surface and let the honey stay underneath. And that's one way of using or making the best of what you got. So it'll go into plastic buckets for now. I've bought a load of plastic buckets for this very reason, in case I had this problem and I had no stock of my own. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility. So I've got a new extractor. I bought a 32 frame Koenigen radial extractor that's going to be set up in my veranda. I'm getting some floor covering today or tomorrow morning, and that's going down. I'm buying, like, it's about 6 meters long by about 5 meters, and that's just a nice big area to cover all my tiles in my veranda. It just means that it's going to have a bit more hard wearing surface, and any spillages won't go into the tiles and all that kind of stuff. You know, it just helps me clean it up. It's a bit of an expense to buy that, but I'd rather have the floor manageable than a total mess. And I've got to, don't forget, it is a part of the house. It's a room in the house where I live, which I'll be using later in the summer. So, awful lot to organise, but this week will be the crunch week. If I can get my honey off and what is good extracted, I'll be happy, and then at least I know that's done and we're on to the next thing. There is no set way to do this. I saw someone on Facebook the other week, literally over a week ago, saying they just extracted their honey and they're a beekeeper near me, and I'm like, I think that was way too early, and I would question whether it would ferment in the buckets afterwards, or in the jars, because it was not even cured and it was still pouring in through the door when they pulled the honey. So you've got to work on that. There's two ways of checking honey without using a hygrometer, or, you know, the actual little testing thing you look through. I can't remember its name now. The one way is the shake test. If you're pulling honey and you get the frame and you give it a good shake, and you let, as if you were shaking out water from a frame, if you give it a good shake and no droplets come off, as a rough guide, that gives you the thumbs up. That means that honey is thick enough and cured enough that it's not going to ferment any further. Okay. The other way is to look at the combs. Now, if your combs are, first of all, nothing from the shake test, but then you look at them and over half of that comb on each frame is capped or very close to being capped, that's a sign that the bees have prepared the honey, removed the moisture, dried it to a level that is acceptable, so it will be sealed. And I personally have never had honey ferment here in Brittany. I think in the spring it cures so quickly, and it crystallizes so quickly that literally a day after you've got it in the bucket or the barrel, it starts to crystallize. So I've got my warming wand, my big like thermal lance I'm going to put in the barrel as I fill each barrel up, because it will take a while, because I'm not doing it mechanically. Apart from the extracting process, I've not got a decapper this year. I've got my hands, which is going to be the decapping. So I'm going to use just a warming lance that will just keep that temperature warm while the wax floats up, so I can skim it off. Even if I didn't do that, you'd get the majority of it off when you extract it. But so I'm going to warm that slightly, and then we'll get it all in. But it's, as soon as I take that lance out, it will go off in about 2 to 3 days, and it always does. It literally, people are amazed at how quickly, you know, well, I say to the people I used to sell in bulk, I say, do you want any honey next week? Because I'm extracting next week, because I just put it straight into a barrel or straight into big bins and take it to them. And by the time I get it to them, it's already started to crystallize. But what I do is I put it in the barrel and then I warm it up very slightly just to keep that temperature and keep those crystals from forming. And then I put it in buckets all in the same day, and they can put it in their own pots within that same day as well. So pulling the honey in the spring is a difficult thing for us here. Where we are in Brittany, and in France, I suppose, most of Europe, the honey always crystallizes really quickly because it's made up of very quick crystallizing nectar from spring flowers. And some people ask me this question. Often I get asked, why don't I just take off my queen excluders? Because other people say that when they take them off, it gives the queen uninterrupted access to the colony. Yes, I completely agree it does. And yes, it will probably help against swarming. But the problem is then you've got to sort out the frames that have brood and the frames that don't have brood in your supers. And often the case is that it's probably better to lose a few colonies from swarming than it is to have to deal with the brood mixed with the honey. It just makes it really awkward. That's why I can't kind of portray to people, because they don't know this situation here. They don't understand that if we're going to have a spring crop, you can't have it full of brood, because also you'll lose a lot of your forages for your summer flow. Don't forget, it's the bees they're making now that are going to be used to forage the summer honey. So, you know, I think you've just got to do what you think is right. And I've looked at all this. I've looked at different ways. I've looked at maybe putting queen excluders on after the majority of the nectar's in. But then you've got to go through the colony and find the queen, which is a nightmare. The amount of work we're doing anyway now is crazy all the time. It's never ending here. I'm obviously trying to oversee the start of this building project, and then I've got queens I'm raising, then I've got honey to get off, then I've got apiaries to stream it, you know, then we've got swarms to deal with, then we've got, right, do I do a whole apiary check, or do I say no, I don't think there's going to be any more swarming because it's coolish weather and it's only one swarm, and the other couple I checked either side were okay. You've got to be able to make a kind of informed decision and just stick with it. Beekeeping is like that, and the only way you'll be able to make an informed decision is through experience, okay? I wish, to be honest, I had the time to go through all my colonies again today and tomorrow, but I don't, because you see that over there, that is my nuke pile. It's a complete mess, but I've got to get all my nuke boxes ready for next week. I've got to use all the honey that's stored in my bottom shed, my limited space. I've got to get them ready. So as well as pulling honey, I've got to make the nukes ready. I've got to deal with my family life. I've got to get my queens finished through the system, and I've got to get the honey extracted. So it's absolutely bonkers, as I said. And all I want to be able to see is that classic Instagram video that everyone seems to take, where you lift up the honey gate and out it pours. Because when I start to see that, I'll be thinking, okay, that's a good start. Because I've never extracted honey before here on a commercial scale. I've only done it when I had like 30 hives, and that was a complete disaster. And I look back now and think, God, but I'm doing it in a different way this time. I've got a proper decapping table. I've got a proper extractor that's more modern. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be too much of a problem. The key is, if you get your honey off early, it's the risk it could ferment. It might not be dry enough. If you get it off too late, you spend hours holding the extractor down, trying to get out of frames what you can. So you're really doomed if you do, damned if you don't, kind of thing. So to be honest, all the years I've been beekeeping, every year I get to this point and you're tired, you're already questioning what you've done, did you do it the right way, but you just got to stick in there. You just got to kind of hunker down and just do what you think is right. Because I know you go into an apiary, you see a colony that's swarmed, then you're like, oh, how am I going to rectify that? Because obviously everything we do at the moment is working towards the spring and the summer flows. The spring flow's just about done, and next week that curtain will come down, bang, the end of the nectar. It will just stop. It just dries up. There's a tiny bit when it's hot, but generally there's no more. And that is good because it stops our swarming and it finishes that swarm fever. But then we've got to concentrate on getting all those colonies up straight for the summer flow, if it materializes. Remember last year, it was very, very poor. So you question yourself the whole time. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And every year you think, I don't know, maybe I should do it like this. Maybe I should do it that way. Because as with beekeeping, there's a million ways of doing things. So whichever one of the million ways you're doing it this weekend, have a good one, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.